Hello.
Hi there.
Hi.
How's it going? I'm
Got
on
my one fan up there somewhere.
Is that your? They always follow you around. Yeah. Are they related?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. You've got some family support. That's
Yeah.
good to know. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you for having me again.
Really appreciate it. So, food's kind of been an important thing for you for your whole life, and recently, or just a few years ago, you started Cook for Ukraine. Could you just tell us a little bit about how that started and how?
Yeah. As you rightly say, food has always played a big part in my life, and I've decided to change my career about 10 years ago. I was initially in the academia and curating events, and when the war started, at this point I was writing about food and running food events, did a cookbook, and I've worked a lot with a very close friend of mine, Olia Hercules, who, if you are interested in food, probably know of. She's an amazing Ukrainian food writer, and we both share kind of similar backgrounds, culturally, intellectually, creatively. And when the war started on the 24th of February 2022, we went to a protest outside number 10, and it was quite natural that we both felt that the immense trauma and shock that we've experienced can only be channeled in a way to raise awareness about Ukraine. And obviously food for both of us is quite an important aspect of our lives. It's almost like a language that we use to tell our stories, and we just kind of instantly knew that we're going to do something together, use food to raise awareness and to raise funds.
Wow. Okay. So how does it actually work? How does the campaign logistically?
So the idea for the campaign was already based on an existing really brilliant campaign called Cook for Syria that was started a few years before our campaign. And I and Olia were also involved in it partly, so we kind of knew of how that works. So I got in touch with a person called Clyfan. He prefers to be anonymous. That's his Instagram handle.
Do you know who he is?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. But you can't
He's a really wonderful person who does a lot of charity work through food. And he was one of the people who initiated Cook for Syria, so I called him and said, look, I'm thinking of starting something similar, can you just give me some tips on how you started? And being the lovely person that he is, he actually said, well, let's just team up and we're going to work together. And thanks to him, we've immediately sort of connected with the old contacts that he had, who were already part of the Syrian campaign. And then literally within 24 hours of the beginning of the war, we had the campaign set up and people just started donating. And I think it was really essential that we moved so quickly, because that shock that we all felt and that sense of powerlessness that so many people felt who care deeply but just don't know what to do. And you kind of all you end up doing is just sort of doom scrolling on social media and just feeling kind of falling deeper and deeper into that hole. Suddenly you have a call to action and also something that's, we all cook. So this is something that people really responded to, and it's quite healing as well. And I think that's probably the reason why the campaign took off so successfully.
Wow. And are people cooking and then using those funds to fund Cook for Ukraine? Or
so the way it works is we kind of try to raise awareness about what's happening in Ukraine and trying to keep people engaged with Ukraine through food, because obviously, there's so many devastating news out there from Ukraine, from the Middle East, sadly too many. And people tend to get news fatigue, or, it's just only that much horror we can take on a daily basis. So switching that and actually inviting people to learn about food and about culture through food. So we invite people to cook something of Ukrainian origin and post that on social media with the hashtag Cook for Ukraine and a link to our campaign. And then invite people to donate. We've also invited people to host events. We've done lots of events ourselves where we would cook Ukrainian food, also organize talks about Ukrainian culture and food and history. And whatever money we would raise through that, we would donate to our campaign. But also we had restaurants, around 300 restaurants who signed up to the campaign where they offered, where they added an optional £1 charge to each bill, and from that we've managed to raise a really amazing amount of money.
Yeah, wow, an incredible growth, an incredible figure of £2 million. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about Ukrainian food. What's it like? What's your favorite dish?
I mean, as you said, I was born in Russia, but from a family with Ukrainian-Jewish lineage, so I grew up with a lot of Ashkenazi cuisine, but being born in the 80s, during the Soviet era, where multiculturalism was not really allowed. Everything was kind of under the blanket of Soviet cuisine, and so many Ashkenazi dishes that have different names, were kind of known not as a Jewish specific or Ukrainian even. So of course there's lovely stuff like borscht and vareniki, which are dumplings that you can stuff with all sorts of lovely, mostly kind of vegan fillings, very similar to Polish pierogi. Sorry, that's my baby crying.
I think it's a supportive cry.
I hope so.
Yeah.
It's kind of where's my food kind of cry, I think. But also Ukraine is a really beautiful country in a way that it's very diverse regionally and seasonally as well. So, the south of Ukraine is bordering the Black Sea, it's very close to Turkey, so the food that you get there, especially in the summers, there are lots of wonderful vegetables, and it's very much plant-based. There's so many different varieties. I said borscht, and here we kind of know borscht is a red beetroot soup, but actually there's so many different varieties depending on which region you come from, which season you're cooking in, and also kind of just your own family techniques and kind of secrets. So it's very hearty, but also very vegetable rich, and beautifully seasonal. So it's something that's, and also very humble, very inexpensive and quite accessible. There are no kind of expensive spices or expensive ingredients. And I think this is something that, luckily in the recent years, kind of the general food discourse, at least in the UK, is gearing towards a more kind of responsible, mindful, plant-based cooking, mindful of the budget as well, and in that sense Eastern European cuisine is a perfect fit for that kind of philosophy.
Okay, great. And I suppose you could just reflect a little bit on food as a device for storytelling or as a way into culture. And you hinted at that beginning as obviously as a literally nourishing quality, but that its association with positive action and storytelling, and how you found that. Yeah, it's something that doesn't stop fascinating me, and kind of as I grow older and became a parent myself, documenting family history, especially in my personal experience where, I live in a different country linguistically, my family speaks English, how do you communicate to your next generation the stories of the previous generations? And food is a beautiful kind of non-verbal language. It's a very sensual experience that we all respond to in the most visceral way, in a very deep, very intimate way. I find it very powerful as a vehicle to preserve family stories and to pass them on to the next generation, regardless of which country you end up living. And then that's kind of borderlessness of food is so powerful, especially, going back to the conflict in Ukraine. Russia's insistence on drawing clear borders and defining this as ours, and kind of finding fake historical facts about where borders should be drawn. Food is beautiful for that, precisely that ability to cross borders and be universal in that sense. Yeah, so interesting. And I suppose kind of dovetailing with that or tied to that is its use as a way to try and get beyond news fatigue, or that feeling that people have of doom scrolling or not being able to make positive change. I wondered if you could just talk to us about how to overcome that, and I suppose tied to that, how they can be involved in a positive way in the campaign Cook for Ukraine.
Well, I think it's really important to acknowledge that news fatigue is real, and quite a serious thing, and be very aware of how news and how your own kind of practices of using the news and your devices can affect you and those around you. Because I think I learned it the hard way. I just could not sort of switch off for at least 6 months. I was just completely immersed in everything that was happening, and of course it does take a toll on you emotionally, and it's harrowing, the stuff that you get, and these days there's no censorship on social media. Well, I mean, there is, but in the sense of you can see really brutal stuff out there. And it's really important to just tell yourself it's okay to take a break, and both Olya and I've had, and for her it's even more harrowing. Her family home is partly destroyed, it's under occupation at the moment. So it's been really, devastating for her, and we've been very open with each other about how we feel emotionally and kind of checking in on each other about our mental health. And of course, food is cooking is such a beautiful healing process. So I find that through this campaign, you can still feel connected to what's happening in Ukraine. And, at the moment, there isn't really much or that much on the news anymore. Mm-hmm. Sadly, there are lots of other horrendous events happening in the world at the moment. But, even if you're not doing it through the news, there's so many other wonderful ways, and of course, food being one of them. You keep cooking, and when you cook, it often comes with sharing the meal with someone, and you talk during the meal, and you can still kind of be connected to what's happening in a more gentle and a more nourishing way, both emotionally and physically. And also, I think for me, it's in a way, it's also a bit of a political act, because with what Russia is doing in Ukraine, it's obviously stripping the country, and it has been doing that for centuries. Stripping the country of its own identity, appropriating so many cultural figures, from writers to taking food in that direction as well, and really kind of arguing that borscht is a Russian dish. And of course it has been a very common, very popular dish, and in that sense there is that idea of borderless cuisine too, but it's still very important to acknowledge where it comes from and understand the kind of cultural status of certain dishes within the country. And of course borscht is quintessentially Ukrainian in that way. So I think, to me, kind of reclaiming so many dishes that were lost under the blanket of Soviet cuisine and kind of standardized across the whole post-Soviet space, to look back at it and say, actually, no, this is Ukrainian cuisine, and let's celebrate it for what it is. And Ukraine is a country, and it is a nation, and it has a very unique voice that needs to be heard.
Yeah, and the way you talk about it now makes it sound, and it really does sound like a kind of quite powerful act, an act of resistance in a way. So thank you so much for talking to us, Alissa.
Thank you for having me.
A round of applause for Alissa.
Thank you.